Hi everybody, it's Kim. When you're on an extreme budget, sometimes you really need to stretch those dollars. And one of the most effective ways to do it is by learning how to make your own. For example, instead of buying flour and, pancake mix and noodles and tortillas and things like that, where you're thinking, what am I going to get? I only have, say, $1, $1.50, and I would really like to make some variety in my diet. What am I going to do? You learn to make your own. So you go out and you buy that flour. Buy the biggest bag you can get, whether it be 5 pounds or 50 pounds. The more you buy, the cheaper it is. But, the average 5-pound bag of flour in my area is about $1.25, $1.12, something like that. So out of that, you can get quite a variety. You can do your pancakes, you can make your noodles, you can make your tortillas, you can make some bread, and you can really stretch that 5 pounds over a week. So first what we're going to need, and let me show you how I measure out my flour. You're going to need some flour, very basic. Get the cheapest stuff you can if you have to. I actually prefer the King Arthur, but you know what? When you're on a budget, you do what you have to do. And if it's the Great Value brand at Walmart or the Aldi brand, you get it. Now, what I do is I do not scoop my flour. I spoon it in. I level it off. This is a 1/2 cup. I'm going to need for this particular one, I'm going to need 1.5 cups. So what I do is I take a spoonful of my flour. I spoon it into my container. I take a knife. I'm just gently squishing, tapping it down. I'm not barely touching it. And then you level it off. Now, the other option is, most effective is to go by weight. But this is how I learned to bake, and it works out best for me to do it this way. If you put your thing in the container and push it up against the side, most likely you're going to get a lot more than you think you need because it packs it in. So I'm going to need that 1.5 cups plus a little extra later when we go to roll them out in order to get them to not stick to my counter, okay? So that was 1.5 cups of flour. This can be doubled, however. This is going to make between 6 and 8 tortillas. The next thing you're going to need is a little bit of salt. The nice thing with these, which I do a lot with my noodles and with tortillas or anything else, you could add seasonings. Oh, looks like I'm getting rather low on salt. You can add all kinds of seasonings to your dough and really make them flavorful. That's about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. This one's controversial. I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, not baking soda. It's going to give it just a tiny bit of rise, so about 1/2 teaspoon. And then you come to your oil. Now your oil, you're going to have some choices. When I make mine, I prefer to use my homemade tallow. It's beef tallow. You can use pork lard, whatever. But most people don't have this. You could use bacon grease. Bacon grease adds a very savory flavor, but you're going to get that little bacon flavor to it depending on what you want to use it for. So you could use some bacon grease, or you can go to the dollar store and you could pick up some cheap vegetable oil. Whatever you have that's going to work for you. Again, it depends on your budget. A couple other options. If you're making soup, and like for example, in order to get that beef tallow, I took some beef short ribs, which are extremely fatty, and I could cook down however I want to do it. The next morning, you take all that grease that floated to the top, and you use that. It's free. You had it from whatever you cooked. You could do the same with chicken fat. Use what you have. That's part of being on a budget. Those greases, those oils, those are really important for your diet. Now, what I'm going to add is 3 tablespoons of whatever type of oil. Now, this is just that cheap vegetable oil because, like I said, this is an extreme budget here. Don't forget oil. You have some of your, there are certain vitamins that are oil that you can only get through oils into your diet. They also have, you know, if you're on a budget and you're eating light or eating on very little money, you need that oil to add calories into your diet. So, you know, an average woman needs about 2,000 calories a day, a man about 2,400 calories. So you can get some of it that way. I like to mix my oil into my flour gently. I'm just tossing with a fork. You could use a spoon. If you have solid, like if I was using the, say the bacon grease, I could either melt it or I can mix that in with a couple of knives if you have it. Or to be honest, I picked up a cheap pastry blender again at the dollar store. So get it mixed in as good as you can. Your fingers, well-washed hands are your best gadget in the kitchen, in my opinion. I want to get this oil incorporated into my flour without doing a lot of, you don't want to knead it yet. I just want to get it incorporated. Some of the larger pieces broke up. I'm just barely touching it with my fingers, and I'm breaking up those large particles of oil. Once again, you could do this with your beef tallow, chicken fat, whatever. If you want, you could add some garlic powder, cumin, you know, onion powder, whatever you like to flavor these things. They don't have to be tasteless. So, you know, let your imagination go wild. Add what your family likes. It really adds a difference. You could take some tomato juice if you wanted to and make a tomato type flavor instead of the water, which we're going to add next. But we're going to do the very basics today. Now you can see that oil is well incorporated. There's no huge lumps in there. Hope you can see that good. And next thing is going to be to add your water. So far, let's go over that again. 1.5 cups of flour, a half teaspoon each of salt and baking powder, and 3 tablespoons of oil. That's all I've needed so far. You can add those other flavors if you like. The next step is you're going to add up to 1/2 cup or so of water. Now, I don't want to tell you to add the full half cup because with flour, it's going to depend. Is it very humid out? Is it, you know, is your flour super dry? That's what's going to make the difference. So there's about 3 tablespoons there. Once again, I'm just going to start mixing it with my fork. My hands will be used in a little while because that, to me, is my best tool once again. I'm going to get it somewhat incorporated. And your hands really help to know where the binding is going to be. Now I'm just gently squeezing it to see if I can get this to stick together. As you see, it's still really dry. So we're going to add another couple tablespoons of our water. If you know that 8 tablespoons is a 1/2 cup, it may take more, it may take less. I try to mix it in with my fork as much as I can so I don't get, you know, too much dough stuck to my hand at first. When you first add that water, and then you can quickly toss it with your fingers. Now, it's starting to come together a little better. Oops, sorry about that. Just getting it tossed well, and now I can start to squeeze it to see if it's going to stick. As you can see, it's not going to stick yet. It's getting there, but it's not quite there. You don't want it overly wet, but you definitely don't want it too dry. If it's too wet, that's an easy fix because you can just add flour when you need it. So here I'm at another couple tablespoons. That's not a measuring tablespoon, that's a actual large spoon for my kitchen, so that's probably a little less than half. I did measure out a 1/2 cup, so I know it's less than 1/2 cup so far. Toss this up. Trying to incorporate as much of that flour as I can. Start squeezing it together. Like I said, it's a little easier to go dry, or actually a little too wet than too dry because it's not going to stick well. Now we're getting there. See, it's starting to stick together, but you still see too much flour. Do a couple more, and that should be about where I need it. Now it's going to get sticky on my hands because most of that is already incorporated. So start kneading it in. Let's see where we're at. You don't need to knead it a lot. You just need it to come together. It still looks a little dry, but we're going to make sure it's well incorporated before we go too far with it. My hands are not the best hands in the world, so I do have to take things slow. I think we're getting there. It's a little sticky, but my flour is going in. And I just kind of squeeze and mash until I get it. I want to make sure all my flour is in there before I take it out of my bowl and start kneading it well. So I think we have it's just a little tacky, but it's not sticking to my hands. You could feel a little bit of wetness to it, but it's not sticking. So now it's just a matter of depending on how sticky it is, you want to use as little flour extra as possible. I just don't want it to stick. Of course, my counter has been cleaned and bleached really well before I get started. And I'm going to simply knead this a few times to make sure everything is very, very well incorporated. My oils, if you want to add your spices, they're not difficult to make. You do not have to have a tortilla press. You will need something to help roll them out. You could use a rolling pin. Again, I can pick it up from the dollar store. You could use the side of a large bottle, like a wine bottle, glass bottle, something like that. That's a little sturdy. You don't want to use like a cheap, glass that's going to break. Just going to knead this well. See, there was a half a cup of water in there, and you could see I have a little less than a quarter cup left. So I definitely did not use that half cup of water. That was a little bit warm, by the way. You don't want ice water. You want it slightly warm. I put it in my microwave for 30 seconds, and while I was gathering up the rest of my things, so it was kind of more like room temperature warm. Now, there you go. We want a nice soft dough. The more you knead it, the more gluten you make. So that's up to you how far you want to go with it. The gluten gives it the elasticity that you need. But if your hands, like mine, I have the carpal tunnel and it starts to bother my wrist after a while, I may have to let it go and walk away from it. You could put it in a food processor, pulse it a few times while you're mixing it together. That brings it together really quick. I don't happen to own one, so I do everything the old-fashioned way. There, we've got a pretty smooth dough. Now, depending on how many you want to make, probably could use a little bit more kneading, but you want to knead it so that it really, really comes together well. Knead it a little bit more than I am here, but my hands aren't going to take much more. I'm going to divide this into roughly, there's three of us here, so I want to make 6 tortillas. They might be a little bit larger, but we're going to go about there. I'm going to go in half. Now that's going to give me what? 2, 4. So I got to cut that. These are a little bit on the small side, so I'm going to take a nip off of there. A little bit off there. You can weigh them out if you want them exactly the same. That's actually the best way to do it, but I'm going to put them into rough balls here, about the same size. They don't have to be. Depends on how you like to cook. Do you like your things precise? Do it that way. I really don't care if they're exactly the same or not. I get them roughly the same. One looks way too big, I'll take some out of that one and put it in another. They might be just a tad dry, so we shall see when we go to roll them out. Okay, so I have roughly 6 balls here, similar in size. Now, if you want to knead them this way, you could, This is how I tend to do mine. I get them kind of where my fingers work better than my wrists. Like I said, the carpal tunnel is a little tough on my wrists, so kneading things can be a chore. Make them into balls the best you can. To be honest, this is very similar to how you do noodles. You just use a few different ingredients, but basically my noodles, flour, eggs, and salt. But I flavor my noodles very well. I add garlic powder and things like that, so basically very much the same. Okay, so I'm going to need to let these rest under a towel for a minimum of 20 minutes. I like to rest mine closer to 45 minutes, but if you're in a rush, 20 minutes will do fine. You need to let that gluten begin to relax a little bit. Right now, it's really, hung together. It's really bound up, so I need to let that relax. So we're going to let this rest. Half hour, come back and check it, and then we'll try to roll one out. If it does not roll out easy, then we have to let it rest a little bit more. So while you're doing that, you can do other parts of your meal, whatever. If I was making, say, tacos, I would be browning my meat and things like that at this time. And clean up. So we'll be back shortly. I wanted to show you, these have rested about 20 minutes. Set these off to the side, and I'm going to cover those again. And you can kind of tell the dough has relaxed quite a bit. It's very soft, and I'm barely needing to push it with my fingers. So you can roll these out in a couple of ways. If you have a tortilla maker, you just squeeze it. You don't want to put much flour. You just want enough so that it doesn't stick on your surface. Personally, I prefer to roll those out over on parchment paper, but we're doing this on a budget. We might not have that stuff. You can buy it at the dollar store, so at least you know that. Instead, don't go back and forth like this, okay? You want to go from the center out, pushing down from the center out. You tend to get a better roll out that way. If it springs back, if this continues to spring back, it means it needs to rest a little bit more. So I would let that rest another 10 or 15 minutes, okay? You want to get them as thin as you can. Might need to rest just a little bit more. It seems to be springing back on me, but I think we can get this rolled out well enough. Every time I pick it up, it wants to spring back. See it kind of shrinking back? It's an indication it should rest a little bit more, but usually you can manhandle it a little bit. I can't go this way. Usually I would go this way, but my camera's in the way, so that's why I'm picking it up more than usual. Normally I would go this way and then this way to roll it, but like I said, my camera's in the way. Now you want to get that as thin as possible. And if I didn't have to flip it around so much for you, it would have been pretty much done by now. Like I said, it's not difficult to do. In the meantime, while I'm rolling these out, I'm going to go and warm up my pan. Use whatever you have. I use all cast iron, so that's what I have. That's what I'm going to use. And I'm just going to take these. I'm going to move it to the side while I continue to roll, and I'm going to put it under my towel while I get my next ball out. You can get it started if you want with your fingers a little bit, kind of getting it round as much as you can. Don't let those other balls dry out on you. Keep them covered. The edges are getting a little dry on mine, so I'm going to put them under a cup here. Again, from the center out. Kind of makes it a little easier to make it round that way. You can finesse it a bit, I guess, if you want to say that. And it helps you get it pretty thin. About the time, by the way, this made, for me, I think you saw, I made 6 balls out of this one. So it's going to make 6 tortillas. I did a little bit of math on it. Now, my price would be cheaper because I happen to buy my flour in much bigger bulk. If you bought a 5-pound bag of flour and you made this particular size, tortilla, you made it with the 1.5 cups of flour. If your flour cost $1.24 for 5 pounds, which is about, ours is a little cheaper if I buy the Walmart brand. I think it's something like $1.12, but let's say you paid $1.24 for 5 pounds. By the time you make your dough and use a little bit to flour your surface, you're going to use approximately 8 ounces of flour, okay? If you do that, it's going to cost you, about 16 cents or 2 cents an ounce is what I figured my flour cost if I paid $1.24 for 5 pounds. So 2 cents an ounce at 16 cents. If you purchase the dollar store oil, that package that I showed you, it was 9 cents or 3 cents a tablespoon. This one got a little wonky, but it'll be okay. So my entire thing cost me about 25 cents. Yes, that's not, you can buy them for what, $1.50 or $2 a package for 8. Is your time worth it? If you have time, you're not working, it only takes a few minutes while you're cooking dinner to make these. So that really doesn't cost, much time. But, the cost savings, you save about at least $1 per package. And more importantly, you're getting another 4.5 pounds of flour to make things like egg noodles or biscuits or pancakes or, whatever else you might want to eat under that same $1.24, which you paid for that flour that you could have paid just for 1 package of tortillas. So, when you're on an extreme budget, learning how to make a few simple things can really, really give you some variety, and it can stretch your budget quite a bit. So I'm going to continue to roll these out. My pan is warming, like I said, on the side. And once I get these rolled out, we'll go over there and we'll cook them up. And you'll see how quick and easy they really are. Okay, I have my tortillas. This is a little bit not warm enough. You can see I can hold my hand just above it. So I had it on low. I'm going to turn it up to about medium low. And I rolled out, normally I would roll out like 3 or 4 tortillas and then cook one, because it only takes a minute or so to roll them out, but that's across the room. So I'm going to put it in my pan. You want it hot enough that it cooks that side in about a minute. It only takes about a minute to cook these on that first side. So I'm going to bump my heat up until I know, you can hear a slight sizzle, that it's cooking well. You can start to see some of the bubbles coming up here. That's what you want. And then if you want, until you know better, you can peek a little bit. You want it lightly brown on that side. The other trick to this, once again, is have that towel ready, because you're going to want to stack your tortillas either in a container that you could put a lid on, or you could stack them back in those towels, because that's what's going to keep them nice and soft. It's going to be having them kind of steam once you take them out of the pan. Not quite done on that side. Should have had a couple little brown spots. The first one is always kind of like a pancake. You get that first one that's not perfect. It's going to taste fine. You just might not get those really pretty little brown spots on them that make you go, that looks good. So by the time I made this, it took me, 10 minutes to mix it up, if that. Another, I had to let it rest for 20 minutes, but you could be cooking other things at that time. And then, 10 minutes max to roll them out. 10 minutes to cook them. See, now you got a couple nice little brown spots on there. I just want to make sure it's cooked without being overcooked. And you might get a few puffy spots. That's okay. You don't like them? Punch a hole in them, they'll flatten down. But that shows to me that they're authentic and ready to go. So that one's cooked. I'm going to put it on my towel, cover it up. And once again, that's going to keep them soft and pliable. So when you go to eat them, they'll be ready to go. Now my pan's, you could tell it's a little better. It's sizzling a little better. I have my other half of my towel over the stack of tortillas that are not cooked yet. We're going to cook this about a minute on this side. Then you flip it to the other side 20 seconds to 30 seconds, and they're pretty much done. So we'll recap that recipe once again really quick for you. I used 1.5 cups of flour. I had a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of baking powder. The baking powder is optional, but it helps them puff up just a little bit. And then I had 3 tablespoons of oil. The oil is what gives it the flexibility that you need in a tortilla. You can use vegetable oil. Like I said, you could use coconut oil, bacon grease, whatever you like that you have on hand, you can use. And then I used up to a half a cup of the water, warm-ish room temperature water. Now, if you don't want these, if you're going to make these and let them sit, you're going to, make them light, and then you can throw them back in a pan for a minute and toast them before you use them. They make great quesadillas. I mean, how easy is a quesadilla, right? It's just cheese, or you can do cheese, just plain cheese if you want. See how nice and brown that is? So that's going on my towel with my other one. I'm going to cover it and let it steam a little bit. And I'm just going to continue to cook these until all of them are done. So tell me, is this something that you think is something you can do? I got that one a little wonky when I pulled it off my towel. But you know what? I don't care about the looks. I care about the taste. Is it worth it, working on them for up to a half hour and saving between $1 and $2? That's up to you. Again, I still have about 4.5 pounds of flour left over that I could make my noodles. I could make biscuits, although biscuits use a bit of, if you have the budget for some type of oil. Biscuits made with bacon grease. Bacon grease is amazing, by the way. It is delicious, delicious, delicious. Don't get your pan too hot. My pan's getting a little hot now. I'm going to turn it down. That was on medium-high. I've got more of a medium because you want the inside to cook without the outside getting too firm. So if you're on an extreme budget, learning how to make some very basics. I now know how to make tortillas. I've got 4.5 pounds of flour left. I can make egg noodles, which are super easy. And more importantly, you can add flavor to them. Your noodles do not have to be flavorless. You can add your garlic powder, and if you want to add chili flakes to it, whatever, you can make it however you like it. And then you throw them in your soup or whatever, and oh my gosh, you have a depth of flavor that you won't get from a store-bought noodle. I'm going to continue to cook these up, and when I'm done, I'll show you what they look like when they're all done. I wanted to show you how these turned out. They're nice and soft and pliable. Like I said, you can easily use them to roll up a taco or whatever. It might be a little bit thicker than, if I had a taco press, but I hate to say it. I kind of like my things a little bit on the thicker side. I like them kind of chewy. And I did undercook them slightly because I want to be able to warm them when I make, say, a quesadilla or something like that. But anyway, you can see they all turned out really nice. And 25 cents for the entire batch. or what, 6 cents, 6 pennies per tortilla. I don't think that's a bad deal. So anyway, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer any that I can. And let me know if you try them and how they worked out for you, because I really think it's worth getting to know how to make these. And I really hope you have a fantastic day.